This salary negotiation mistake could be costing you thousands of dollars in unrealized income. So stick around and I'll tell you exactly what it is. Hey everybody, it's Brian from A Life After Layoff, and today I want to talk to you about a salary negotiation mistake I'm seeing more and more commonly in today's job market. But before we get too far into it, if you're interested in more career-related videos just like this one directly from a corporate recruiter, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You might also want to hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future content. And I would say this is especially important right now if you're somebody that's in an active job search and wants an insider's edge into how major corporations hire. Because I spill the beans and I tell you all the dirty stuff that you won't hear anywhere else. So let's start with a little bit of a background story. I had a client reach out to me recently, and she wanted to set up a series of coaching sessions because she had experienced a layoff this past October, and she got caught up with one of the big tech layoffs. And she had been dealing with a particularly difficult job search as a result, applying to a lot of jobs, getting a lot of rejections, getting into some interview processes, but not necessarily getting to the finish line. However, she had one job that she did get to the finish line on, and there was a disappointment there. And that's when she contacted me. So throughout the course of the coaching sessions, we started to diagnose where exactly things were breaking down. We looked at the resume, we looked at the LinkedIn, how she was handling networking, how she was approaching the job search, her interview skills, and all that kind of stuff. And inevitably, we got to the job that she had recently interviewed for. And she was going into it, she said she was relatively excited. It was a position that she thought could be a good fit for her. And she performed decently enough in the interview. But when it came time for them to present the offer, it was something that was underwhelming to her. And she said she was quite disappointed in the amount of money, but she said she was tempted to take the job. So you go back to the first round screen, and I asked her, what did you tell the recruiter when you were discussing the salary expectations in the very beginning? And she said that when the recruiter asked her in her preliminary screen about what her salary expectations were, that she gave the number that they ultimately ended up offering her. I asked her, why did you give a number that you wouldn't be really that comfortable with? And she said, well, the reason why is because it's actually $25,000 less than I used to make at my previous job, and the benefits package wasn't as good. But what she said was, I gave that number because I didn't want to be eliminated from the job search. I felt like in all of my other jobs that I was getting rejected for, I wasn't sure if that was the reason. And I didn't want salary to be the issue of why I wouldn't move forward and get this offer. And again, it was based off of desperation. And I asked her, would you be able to live on the salary that they gave you? Is this or just as aspirational where you wanted to be? And she said, I actually can't even pay my bills at the amount that I gave him. And I said, well, why did you give that number if you can't even pay your bills with it? You have to know what your realistic worth is based on the geographic area that you live in. And she said, I'll be perfectly honest with you. Again, I was desperate, and I know that things are coming to an end with my unemployment, and I panicked, and I've been telling employers consistently, kind of lowballing myself. I also warned her, when you're filling out your job applications, be very careful what you put as a number in there, because that's also used as another data point when you go to negotiate your salary. They'll look at that and see if there's a huge discrepancy. So I probably, if I'm filling out an application, I might only put a $1 in as my expectation, and then have a conversation with the recruiter, making sure that it's a reasonable expectation, but having that conversation and discussing salary only when I'm talking to an actual human. So what I told her was, even in a difficult labor market, we still have to know what our value is, and we have to believe and stand firm in it, because the number that you present in the salary expectation question will be used throughout the rest of it. And when they get to the offer, the human resource department and potentially a hiring manager or the recruiter are going to look at that number that you gave, and they're going to base it. There'll be some other factors, but if you come in saying that you need the bottom end of a range, or a range that's lower than you'd realistically be comfortable accepting, and that becomes their starting point of their offer, it's going to be a lot harder to negotiate back up to where you think you realistically need to be. So she didn't do herself any service by doing that, because now the salary negotiation could be completely off the rails if she comes in and suddenly she's asking for 25 grand more, because the company's probably going to say, hey, wait a minute, you told us that you needed this, and now you're coming in 25,000 more, and now it becomes a much bigger problem. Here's the thing. Even in a difficult labor market, companies still know what the value of that particular role on the open market is, and they still have budget to pay for that job. If the job is posted and they're filling it, they're still going to have the budget to pay a person appropriately based on what the market is suggesting. So coming in as a lowball, all you're doing is you're just lowballing yourself for no real reason, because if you're truly the strongest fit, they're going to hire the strongest fit. And even if the strongest fit is making more than what you came in at, they're going to go with the best person. And that might mean that they're going to pay that best person $20,000 or $30,000 more than they're going to pay her, even though she could have potentially gotten that, but she lowballed herself. But the bigger question is that we have to make sure that we know what our value is. And I've talked about how to address the salary expectation question in another video. I will link it, and you should absolutely check that out if you're going into interview process. And this is especially true if you're somebody that's unemployed and you're actively looking for that job. You want to know with a degree of confidence how to answer the salary expectation question so that you don't paint yourself into a corner like she did. But when we look at the labor market as a whole, there are ebbs and there's flows. Sometimes it's an employer-driven market, sometimes it's an employee-driven market. And we've seen over the last few years, it's kind of fluidly gone both sides and kind of quickly gone back and forth. But if you think of it kind of like waves, it ebbs and it flows back and forth, and it can happen relatively drastically. And in this case, especially with all the tech layoffs, when you look back before the tech layoffs, we had this big boom, right? So all these huge salaries and escalating companies, there was the law of supply and demand. Companies had to outbid one another to get the best talent. So salaries escalated, it kind of skyrocketed. And there's a problem with that because people became accustomed to inflated salaries. It's just like when you look at the car market, for example, all these car prices are all inflated, and as supply comes back into the market and less people are able to afford them, there's still dealerships trying to charge these high prices. And even the housing market, you could argue too, there's still these dealerships that are charging these high prices, but there's not necessarily the market there anymore. So inevitably, the prices are going to equalize. And it's the same thing with the job market, the salary market for a variety of these positions. And tech probably led the pace and went probably higher than it should have gone in that regard. Now, I'll never fault somebody for getting as much money as they possibly can in the open market. However, you had to go into it with relative eyes wide open, knowing that this probably wasn't going to last. And so if you are somebody that accepted a job that was 20, 30, 40% higher than what the market probably should have suggested it should be, you had to know that you're probably going to have a target on your back because it's inflated and you're making too much for that particular role. And an employer is only going to be willing to pay, again, based on law of supply and demand, what the market is suggesting. So as the market ebbs and it flows, we want to make sure that we are checking consistently on where the salary ranges are for the types of positions based on our knowledge, our skills, our abilities, all those things. So you should be doing this salary discovery relatively frequently throughout the year. So the moral of the story here is to know what you're worth on the open market and what the market currently is suggesting so that you can go in with a relative position of strength and feel pretty confident about the number that you're presenting. And that's where she made the mistake, because we actually went in and started looking at her compensation expectation and where she was previously compensated. And we did an informal salary survey, kind of did this exercise to figure out where she should realistically be compensated based on what the market is suggesting. And we actually determined that she was, in her previous role before she got laid off, was not necessarily overpaid. She was about midpoint, actually slightly below midpoint for what the market overall was suggesting. So she should have felt very comfortable coming into this interview, telling the recruiter the number that she needed, which would have been consistent with her previous salary, and she would have been fine. She probably would have had this offer that they would have likely been very cool with, and she could have been accepting this job, not needed me anymore, and rode off into the sunset. But she, by lowballing herself, basically kind of ruined that opportunity. And she hemmed and hawed about this job, and now the employer is not feeling warm and fuzzy, so they're probably going off and looking at alternative candidates. And she now is stuck in a kind of a rock and a hard place. And that's why she reached out to me. Long and the short of it is we're back to the drawing board. We're going to continue to work with her to get her back into another interview process, but valuing her properly, because she ultimately, it could be costing, or if she accepts this job, she would have cost herself probably $25,000 to $30,000 in lost income potential. This is a very real thing. And I'm seeing more and more people, especially as layoffs are increasing, getting desperate, throwing out lowball numbers and locking themselves into salary expectations that they can't negotiate themselves out of. So don't make that mistake. Save yourself some money. Just trust me on this, that employers will pay market value for an employee who brings good skills to the table. Just be realistic about what your expectations are based on the level of skill and what the market overall is suggesting. If you need more help in your job search and you're in this similar situation, you can reach out to me for one-on-one coaching sessions. I will leave a link below. You can visit my website and send me an inquiry there. And if you're applying for job after job after job, and you're just getting rejection letters back, and this is assuming that you're reasonably qualified for the jobs that you're applying to, it's almost always a resume issue. And I actually created a course called Resume Rocketfuel, which teaches you how to write a resume from a recruiter's perspective that's going to give you the best chance of writing a resume and presenting one to the recruiter that's going to get you into that interview process based on your background and what skills and what things you currently have. Once you get into that interview process, it is then up to you to sell yourself and make sure that you give the right salary expectations. And that's where the ultimate Job Seeker Bootcamp comes in. It's going to take you each step of the way, giving you tips and techniques on how to ace each round, how to get to that offer, and how to negotiate the best rate for you. Those tips alone will pay for themselves for these courses. So I highly encourage you to check that out if you're interested in trying to get through that interview process in a more authoritative manner. If you want to skip the job applications altogether and have the recruiter come and find you, you absolutely need to be on LinkedIn and utilizing it the correct way. And that's where my course, Unlocking LinkedIn, comes in. It's going to teach you how to set up your LinkedIn profile, how to use that tool to your advantage to unlock the hidden job market, and also have recruiters discover you so that they can start getting you into the interview processes and you can skip the applications altogether. Trust me, much easier to have a recruiter discover you than for you to try to convince a recruiter to call you based on a job application. So hopefully this saves you a few $1,000s in your salary negotiation. And if you like this content, a thumbs up really does help. It takes me hours to make a video. It only takes you a second to hit that thumbs up button, and the algorithm really does like it. Like always, thanks for watching, and we will see you on the next one.